Is that a science project or your little toy set? Miss Collins' voice cut through the room like a cold breeze. Leah Johnson stood at the front of her 10th grade science class holding a model made of green moss soda bottles and clear tubing. The class fell silent, but not out of respect, out of that awkward anticipation when someone knows mockery is about to follow. Leah blinked, her fingers tightened slightly around the cardboard base. This was the project. She'd spent months working on it. Was small, yes, and homemade because that's all she could afford, but it worked. It filtered air using moss, capturing carbon particles in polluted environments. It was inspired by her mother, who used to wheeze each night after her shift at the plastics plant. Leia's goal wasn't a grade, it was a solution, but Miss Collins, standing near the whiteboard in her pressed blue dress and heels, only saw scraps. She smiled thinly, eyes scanning the recycled tubes and plants with a smirk that didn't belong in a classroom. It's very creative, she added with the kind of tone that meant anything but praise. A few students chuckled, one even whispered, "She really brought that." Leah heard it, but she didn't flinch. She set the model gently on her desk, walked back to her seat, and sat upright. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She stared at the front of the room as if nothing had happened, but inside a storm was brewing. What none of them knew was that this was the second version of her design. The first one had collapsed. Just last week she'd rebuilt it with glue from the dollar store, staying up until 3 a.m., hands trembling, eyes stinging. Outside, the wind brushed the windows, and somewhere deep inside her, Leah decided they would not break her. The next morning, Leah awoke to her phone vibrating against her nightstand. At first she thought it was her alarm, but as she reached for it with half-closed eyes, she saw dozens of notifications, texts, missed calls, mentions on social media. Confused, she sat up and opened one of the messages from her cousin. "Girl, you're going viral." Heart pounding, Leah opened her inbox and froze. At the top was an email from the White House Office of Environmental Initiatives. Subject line: official invitation to National Youth Sustainability Forum. The words didn't make sense at first. She read them again and again. Her hands shook. Someone had filmed the class, a 16-second video clip. Miss Collins mocking Leah's project. Leah saying nothing, just quietly placing it on her desk. The caption read, "When brilliance is silenced in plain sight." The video had exploded overnight. 1.4 million views. Comment sections flooded with outrage, praise, and disbelief. Teachers from across the country reposted it. Environmental advocates weighed in. One top comment read, "This kid gets it, invite her to speak." That one came from a verified government account. Leah stared at the screen, barely breathing. Her project, once dismissed as a toy, was being celebrated as a breakthrough. People were calling her the girl with the moss, the silent innovator, the one who held her ground. But to Leah, none of that mattered as much as the fact that someone finally saw what her project truly was: a solution born from struggle. Downstairs, her aunt called out, "Lila, you okay up there?" She whispered back, "Yeah, I think I just got invited to Washington." The room around her was still small, but her world had just blown wide open. 3 days later, Leah stood behind a velvet curtain in a marble-paneled conference hall in Washington, D.C. Her hands clutched a thin folder. Inside was her speech, though she had already memorized every word. Her moss purifier sat beside her on a clear acrylic podium, freshly cleaned and sturdier now thanks to a donated kit she'd received after going viral. The event was the National Youth Sustainability Forum, and the room was packed. Senators, scientists, SOs, educators. The MC's voice echoed across the stage. "Please welcome Leah Johnson, 10th grade student from Southside High School, whose vision for air purification is changing how we think about local innovation." Applause rose. Respectful and curious, Leah walked forward slowly, heels borrowed from her cousin clicking softly across the hardwood. Cameras flashed, but her eyes stayed steady, scanning the crowd, and then she saw her at the back of the hall, partially hidden behind a column, stood Miss Collins. No clipboard, no smirk, just stillness. Leah hesitated only for half a second, but not out of fear, out of realization that even here in the nation's capital the past could still watch her, but this time it wouldn't shape her. She took the mic. "My name is Leah Johnson," she began, "and I believe clean air shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a promise." Her voice was soft, but every syllable landed. She explained her project in simple terms: how moss absorbs carbon particles, how her design cost under $20, how communities like hers had been breathing toxic air in silence for too long. The room was utterly still. Leah didn't raise her voice, she didn't ask for applause, she simply told the truth, and for the first time silence didn't mean dismissal, it meant they were finally listening. After the applause faded, Leah stepped off the stage to a crowd of people she'd never imagined speaking to senior policy advisors, environmental engineers, student leaders from across the country. But none of them talked down to her. They asked real questions about airflow, carbon capture rates, plant density. Leia answered calmly, every word backed by months of research, late-night experiments, and the quiet memory of her mother's wheezing breath. One official from the Environmental Task Force took her aside. "Your design isn't just clever," she said, "it's necessary. We've been looking for scalable models like this for low-cost deployment." Leia blinked. Her project wasn't just symbolic anymore. It had potential, but something else was happening too. Her speech had been clipped and posted online within an hour. The moment she said, "Some inventions don't sparkle, but they save lives," it hit 3 million views. By sundown back home, things shifted. Classmates who once snickered now avoided eye contact or mumbled compliments. A freshman girl slipped a note into Ila's locker, "I didn't know science could look like us." And then one quiet afternoon, Leia returned to her science classroom. The same classroom, same whiteboard, but her desk was different. On top of it lay a box, a brand new lab-grade air quality sensor kit. Next to it a small note written in neat slanted handwriting for version 3. Keep building. There was no name, but Leia didn't need one. The handwriting was familiar, slightly looped letters like someone used to grading papers. Miss Collins had never said sorry. She didn't have to, because Leia had moved past needing validation. She just smiled, packed the kit into her backpack, and walked out. Some lessons don't need to be taught out loud. 1 week later, Leia returned to school early. No cameras, no reporters, just her and the moss purifier, which she carefully carried to the school library, the quietest place on campus. She chose a small table near the window where the sunlight poured in. Each morning she placed the model there next to a folded note, laminated and taped gently to the wood, "In memory of Lorna Johnson, a mother who taught me to breathe even when the world made it hard." No big announcement was made, no principal speech, but slowly word spread. Students began stopping by during study periods, some out of curiosity, others out of quiet admiration. A few teachers brought classes by. One science teacher began using Ila's purifier as a case study in class, not because it went viral, but because it worked. And then one day Leia noticed something new. Beneath the purifier sat a handwritten note on notebook paper, folded neatly. She opened it. "I want to try building something too. I didn't think science was for people like me. Thank you." No signature, just the drawing of a little leaf in the corner. Leia folded the note, slid it into her binder, and stepped out into the hallway where students moved like waves between classes. No one stared at her now. They nodded. They made space, not out of fear or fame, but respect. That evening, as she stood by the front door of her house, she looked up at the sky. The same air, the same fight, but something had shifted. She didn't need medals. She didn't need forgiveness. She had built something real, from grief, from love, from silence. And in her final recorded words at the forum, one line lingered in the minds of millions today: "I didn't raise my voice, I raised my presence."